Hi, I'm Augustine,
And I'm Natalie.
and we're both grade 10 students at Llewellyn Park Secondary School.
Llewellyn Park is a secondary school in Sudbury, Ontario.
And we were excited to know what kids our age know about marijuana.
Let's go check it out.
Did you know that marijuana will be legal in 1 year from now?
I've heard about it.
Do you think it's especially dangerous?
Not as dangerous as some drugs, but it's definitely somewhat of a dangerous thing too.
Do you also think it's addictive?
I'm not really positive, but it definitely could be.
So, do you actually think that marijuana is dangerous?
No, it's not. There's studies that prove it can help with schooling, like sports, everything. I mean, pot's great.
What are your thoughts on children our age smoking pot?
I think it's pretty irresponsible.
What about adults smoking pot?
Also irresponsible, unless if it's for like medical use.
And do you think that it's dangerous?
Yes, definitely, because it can affect your health and your brain, I guess.
I would just like to say,
What are your thoughts on teens smoking pot?
Well, I mean, obviously you shouldn't do it. It's illegal, first of all. And, well, I mean, it's bad for you. Screws up your brain.
What about adults? Is it okay if they use it?
Not really. I mean, when you're high, you don't exactly think about what you're doing. So it can lead to making some pretty bad choices.
Did you know it's actually going to be legal next year?
Like in Canada?
Yes.
No, I didn't know that.
Is marijuana bad for youth, in your opinion?
I don't really know. I think some people know about like health benefits from marijuana, but I'm not sure.
And what about adults? Is it okay if adults use it?
Well, like their brains are like smart, so I think it's okay and it doesn't affect them.
Do you think that the risk of addiction is greater if you use it young than old?
Wouldn't it be the same? That's a stupid idea.
Wow, we found out that we have a lot of explaining to do.
And that's really troubling, considering it'll become a legal drug sometime next year. We read that the federal Liberal Party made that one of its central campaign promises, and I'm sure they're working hard on legalizing marijuana right now. But who's telling kids what's coming?
We wanted to get some basic messages across before legalization hits the streets.
We think kids today are smart. They make better choices when they're informed. So we want to explain to them where marijuana came from,
How it got to be where it is today,
where it's probably going,
who should use it in the first place,
who shouldn't use it.
and what the risks are.
We wanted to compare and contrast it to alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, and other legal substances that can be problematic for some people.
We want students making good informed choices.
We think that it's important to educate students on the subject of marijuana so that they can be able to make those good informed choices.
Where do we get this information, you may ask? Well, we started at home.
Our dad is a doctor, and he talks to us about marijuana as a treatment.
And he's found that cannabis can be an effective treatment for some chronic pain problems.
Our dad prefers to call it cannabis instead of marijuana because he thinks the word marijuana carries too much baggage.
He says he has to use it with the right patient and the right illness, but if they work together to get it right, many of his patients get a lot of benefit from it.
Hearing him talk about marijuana made us interested enough to do some research on our own, and we were blown away when we saw some of the stats.
According to the National Survey of Drug Use and Health in the US, 7% of kids aged 12 to 17 were current marijuana users. That's more than 10 times higher than any other legal drug, and 7 times higher than even alcohol and nicotine.
Right. Only 1% of 12 to 17-year-olds reported heavy alcohol use or cigarette use.
Another statistic that's just as frightening, almost 3% of 12 to 17-year-olds qualified as having a marijuana use disorder, which is basically a fancy term to mean marijuana addiction.
You guys have done a great job educating kids about the dangers of cigarettes and alcohol. Our friends think it's totally uncool to smoke and have no interest in getting drunk.
But marijuana seems to us, most kids our age, think it's okay. If even the Prime Minister says it's okay and it's going to be legal soon, why not try it out?
The number of students using marijuana in Canada is frightening. The Centre of Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto reports that 1/4 of Ontario students used marijuana in the previous year.
And in the 2012 Canadian Community Health Survey, 20% of 15 to 7-year-olds admitted smoking marijuana.
The average age of first contact with marijuana is now only 16.
Wow. It's also the most commonly used illicit drug in Canada, and the numbers are sure to increase when it's legalized.
Marijuana is starting to feel to my generation as a drug without consequence. But it's not like we're getting a lot of reliable information about it, though there are certainly plenty of rumors and myths.
These can range from the good to the bad to the outright ridiculous, like
Marijuana can kill you.
marijuana isn't even that bad.
Marijuana can cure toothaches.
Because of what we've seen, we believe it is imperative that we give our generation a clear understanding of the potential risks and lasting effects of marijuana on the developing brain.
We also think that our schoolmates will respond better to that information if it was coming from another teen.
Always remember, teenagers are nothing if not resourceful. If marijuana is out there and legal, teenagers are definitely going to be able to get their hands on it. So what might help prevent all the downsides of teenage marijuana use?
As those of you with teenagers well know, we don't respond well to being preached to, talked down to, or lectured by adults. And scare tactics just don't work. Just saying, oh, marijuana is really bad for you, just won't do it. This will most undoubtedly fail.
But we believe that providing clear teen-to-teen information will allow our schoolmates and other teens to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to try marijuana.
We definitely know teenagers can be quite trying at times.
I know this personally because we can be quite trying at times.
Hardly. But we think teens will listen and think about this message more carefully if their peers were telling them that marijuana really isn't risk-free.
Now, like so many things in life, marijuana can produce both great benefit and great harm.
As a medication, it can be an effective painkiller and can relieve painful muscle spasms and even some seizure disorders.
As a leisure time activity, it is no more addictive than caffeine and is the third most commonly used recreational drug in the world after tobacco and alcohol. But in the wrong hands, it can lead to the dulling of mental processes, lower IQ, addiction, the amotivational syndrome, and can even cause persistent vomiting and stomach pains.
In the following video, we hope to highlight some of those concerns and create a classroom presentation that could be shared across Canada.
This could be part of a larger educational strategy or used as a standalone talk that would be a springboard for classroom discussions.
We wanted to demystify marijuana. It is just a plant with some psychoactive components after all, like so many others.
We want to explain some of the risks associated with it and give kids information so that they can make intelligent choices regarding marijuana.
So want to see our video?
Hi, I'm Augustine.
And I'm Natalie.
We're 15,
Twins, actually.
and we're grade 10 high school students in Sudbury, Ontario.
We've been reading a lot about the Liberal government's plan to legalize marijuana.
So we thought we'd make this video to explain a little more about it.
First, some history.
Marijuana wasn't always called marijuana. It was once known simply as cannabis.
Cannabis has been used as a medicine and a recreational drug for thousands of years. It has been identified in ancient ceramic pots dating back to 10,000 years ago. Some experts believe that cannabis may have been one of the first plants to be cultivated by humans.
But the Chinese are regarded as the first to use cannabis for its medicinal properties 6,000 years ago.
It was traded from China to India, then taken by Arabian traders into the Middle East. Cannabis was used by ancient Egyptians for treating glaucoma and inflammation.
The Arabs then brought cannabis into southern Spain in the 8th century. There, it became a widespread medicine used for many different ailments. And cannabis as hemp was fantastic for ropes on ships, so its use in the Spanish Armada exploded.
Spanish explorers eventually took cannabis across the Atlantic to South America, where it grew abundantly.
From there, it worked its way into Mexico and into America, where it was just as popular. Even George Washington and Thomas Jefferson grew hemp.
Hemp is extremely useful and is used not just for rope, but also for paper and clothing. The seeds are a valuable source of protein.
By the end of the 19th century, cannabis was commonplace and everywhere. Plantation owners grew it, slaves smoked it, and doctors prescribed it. Everyone used it in cough syrups, headache remedies, and potions for upset stomachs.
Then, for some very dodgy racist and political reasons, politicians in the USA decided to clamp down on it. They passed the Pure Food and Drugs Act, which regulated it and made it hard to buy.
That's when they stopped calling it cannabis and started calling it by the slang word marijuana. So lots of people had no idea what the law referred to. Soon after that, many states started banning it. Marijuana was being shunned.
Why was this? There are a lot of theories, but we now believe it was because cannabis was associated with immigrants, jazz music, and black culture. In the 1930s, predominantly white American society stigmatized and denounced these things as dangerous and evil.
Then in the 1970s came President Richard Nixon and his infamous war on drugs. He declared that America's #1 enemy was drugs, and that the hippies were now the enemies of the state because they used marijuana.
Marijuana was portrayed as an evil destroyer of youth, a dangerous, highly addictive substance with no benefits. All research on the benefits of marijuana stopped.
Things finally started to change with the new millennium. Canada led the charge, making marijuana available to people with certain medical conditions in 2001.
Now, Canadians are reconsidering marijuana or cannabis once again as a recreational drug. Legislation to make it legal may begin as early as next spring. With that, Canada can usher in a new era for marijuana. But there are still lots of questions to be answered.
On that note, let's go over to our expert scientists, Mr. A and Miss N. Fun fact, did you know that 80,000 acres of hemp are currently being grown in Canada?
Fascinating, isn't it? And yet, I bet that most of you didn't know that hemp and marijuana are the same plant.
Honestly, I don't blame you. It's not exactly a common topic of conversation. So, hemp is pretty similar to marijuana, but not quite.
Both plants are from the genus Cannabis, but while marijuana has a lot of psychoactive components, hemp has been bred to have very little.
It also has been bred to be a much tougher and stringier plant, which is why it is so often used for rope, fabrics, and even clothing.
Marijuana or cannabis is used recreationally or as a medicine because of its higher concentration of these psychoactive components.
Now, what are these psychoactive components we keep talking about? Well, these are the things that make marijuana so unique and special.
There are two main chemicals in marijuana, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and CBD, or cannabidiol. These are called cannabinoids. There are a lot of other cannabinoids, up to about 70 of them, but in much smaller quantities.
The amounts of THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids can be bred to be at very different levels in different marijuana strains. There are also these things called terpenes. The terpenes give different strains of marijuana their unique smells and tastes, like pine, coriander, and grapefruit.
And skunk, maybe?
You may have heard about two marijuana strains, sativa and indica. There's a lot of debate raging on right now whether these are different subspecies of marijuana or if they're in reality the same plant. But nowadays, it really doesn't matter. There's been so much crossbreeding that it's not possible to tell them apart.
Okay, back to THC.
THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is psychoactive. That is, THC makes the user feel euphoric or high, buzzed, or even stoned. In contrast, CBD, cannabidiol, has no psychoactive effects, so using a plant with lots of THC can make you high, but using a plant with lots of CBD and very little THC, not high.
So, why is THC psychoactive?
It's simple. Our brains have little receptors, like little locks, sitting on the nerve cells. THC acts like a tiny key that opens the lock and gets those cells working away. Nerve cells firing in certain parts of the brain can give you that buzzed feeling.
Unfortunately, THC does other stuff in your brain that can be less than pleasant. It can cause dizziness, problems concentrating, loss of coordination, memory problems, anxiety, and paranoia.
And there are THC receptors in the brain that tell the heart to beat faster and the blood pressure to shoot up. And that's never good.
How about the long-term effects?
Well, there hasn't been a ton of research into long-term effects of marijuana in adolescents. There isn't even that much research into marijuana in adults. So thank you, President Nixon. But we do have some data.
We know that one of marijuana's most significant effects is on the brain.
Neural pruning may sound like something you do to a shrubbery, but it isn't. During adolescence, your brain constantly matures and changes until you're in your early 20s. But your brain only has a limited amount of space for nerve cell connections. It has to get rid of some connections by pruning them away so that new ones can grow. This is neural pruning.
In adolescents that use marijuana, however, neural pruning doesn't happen quite right. This can lead to problems in concentration, decision-making, and memory.
In this modern 21st century, your brain is your key to a good education and a good job. Why would you risk damaging it?
Then, there's the issue of schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia is a really, really bad mental illness.
Marijuana has been linked to schizophrenia, but does marijuana cause schizophrenia?
The unfortunate answer is we don't know. There certainly is a link between early marijuana users and schizophrenia, but lots of other factors can come into play, like whether anyone else in the family has schizophrenia. The problem is we don't really know what factors are important yet. The disease of schizophrenia is a life-altering and terribly debilitating mental illness. If you have relatives with schizophrenia, you know what I mean. But even if you don't, would you want to take that chance?
Hopefully, with further research, we'll find out whether there is truly a link. But now, better to be safe.
Now, what about marijuana's effects on the lungs?
I don't think any teenager would argue that cigarettes are bad for you. We've been taught about this since JK, and it's clear from statistics that cigarette smoking is steadily decreasing amongst teens.
But smoking marijuana is as harmful to your lungs as smoking cigarettes. There are the same nasty carcinogens and tars in marijuana smoke that are found in tobacco smoke. And it's pretty clear that smoking marijuana increases the risk of bronchitis, wheezing, and a better chance to get colds or flus.
Now, marijuana does have many medical uses.
It's an effective painkiller.
It can help with people with seizure disorders.
It can reduce nausea in patients getting chemotherapy for cancer.
It can help regulate weight and appetite in patients with AIDS.
And it can help with muscle spasms in patients suffering from an awful brain disease called multiple sclerosis.
Doctors can prescribe marijuana for their patients, but they don't really want their patients to smoke anything. Think about it. How often do doctors give a medicine to a patient, then ask them to light it on fire and breathe in the smoke?
So how do doctors expect their patients to take in their medical marijuana?
They want them to either vape, yes, vape it, or take it by mouth as a concentrated oil.
Vaping is short for vaporizing, or taking the marijuana leaf and heating up so all those marijuana compounds, the cannabinoids, terpenes, turn into a vapor and can be breathed in. The vaporizer never gets hot enough to burn the marijuana. It just dries out all the oils, and those oils are heated out of the marijuana leaf. Because it doesn't burn, there are no products of combustion, so no tars and carcinogens that you'd get with smoking.
Speaking about vaporizing versus smoking, there's this urban myth that marijuana smoked through a bong is not as bad as smoking a joint.
A bong is essentially a big glass, water-filled pipe for smoking marijuana. The marijuana is packed into the pipe end, water is poured into the bowl, and the marijuana is lighted. The user breathes in the smoke from the burning marijuana through the water.
Is it somehow safer? No way. The smoke may be cooled, but it's still smoke, and the products of combustion are still there. Even with the bong, you get the same carcinogens and tars found in cigarette smoke.
Now, marijuana, like anything in life, can be used for both good and bad. It's not the devil's lettuce, killing innocent youths around the globe and around the clock, but neither is it a drug that can be used regularly and not cause some harms to some people.
We still don't know a lot about marijuana and its effects on teenagers. Maybe it isn't as bad as the studies show, but maybe it's worse. Hopefully, we will learn a lot more about this in the years to come. But do you really want to take that gamble by using it now? What do you think? Better safe than sorry?
I'm sure you're brimming with questions of your own now.
Unfortunately, seeing as we are separated by this screen, we can't answer you directly.
But what we can do is answer some of the common questions our schoolmates asked us when they found out we wanted to make a video about marijuana.
Isn't marijuana addictive?
Marijuana is as addictive as caffeine. Seriously, roughly 9% of coffee drinkers meet the criteria for being addicted. And the overall number of people who have ever tried marijuana who get addicted is estimated to be about 9%. But that doesn't tell the whole story. If you start to use any potentially addictive substance when you're young and your brain is still developing, the risk of addiction goes way up. That goes for coffee, cigarettes, alcohol, and yes, marijuana. Start marijuana at age 13 and you have about a 20% chance of developing a full-blown addiction. Start after 21 and it drops to below 3%. So overall, the risk of addiction may be 9% for all new users, but the early users are at a much higher risk.
What is heavy use of marijuana?
Great question. There's no fixed definition of heavy use, but some studies define heavy use as 50 exposures per year, while others call it 3 to 4 exposures per week.
Is there more than one type of marijuana plant?
As was discussed earlier, hemp and marijuana come from essentially the same plant. They belong to a genus called cannabis. There are 3 types of cannabis: Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. There's no one marijuana plant, and sativa and indica strains have been crossbred so many times that they are now very hard to tell apart.
Can I grow my own marijuana?
Yes! As of August this year, the law changed and people are allowed to grow their own, but only if they have a prescription from a doctor or nurse practitioner to use medical marijuana, and they apply and are granted permission to grow it for themselves and to grow it for up to one other person with a prescription. Now, if you get permission to grow marijuana in your backyard or in a closet somewhere, you'll still have to be inspected and will have to meet high standards, though probably not as high as the licensed producers who are heavily regulated and regularly inspected by government inspectors. Licensed producers undergo intense scrutinization by the government to make sure their marijuana is of the highest standard and is very safe to use.
Why don't people just buy it off the street?
Buying marijuana from the guy down the road is not legal. Even if they have a license to grow it, they can't sell it to anyone. And the guy with the unregulated grow-up may not be growing safe weed. The marijuana he's selling has not been through any quality checks or inspections and may well be full of fungus or covered in herbicides, fungicides, or pesticides. So it's only legal if you get a marijuana prescription from a doctor. And it's only legal to grow your own if you get permission and have been inspected. And the safest and most reliable supply will still be from the officially sanctioned licensed producers.
Is it worse to drive drunk or drive stoned?
That is an excellent question. Two studies reported by the National Highway Safety Administration in its Traffic Safety Facts Research Note, February 2015, clearly show that driving under the influence of alcohol is far worse than driving after using marijuana. That doesn't mean driving stoned is completely safe. Lots of closed course driving studies have shown that marijuana slows your reflexes, makes you inattentive, and results in poor judgment calls. Best way to arrive safely is to drive clean and sober.
Why is the government making it legal?
Well, actually, the Liberal government of Jean Chrétien made medical marijuana legal in 2001. The current Liberal government under Justin Trudeau plans to make recreational marijuana legal by the end of 2017. Their website says they want to, quote, legalize, regulate, and restrict access to marijuana.
Our hope is that they include education on the safe use of marijuana as part of their platform. Our society has hundreds of years of experience dealing with alcohol, and we're pretty good at managing it. Okay, there are still lots of people with alcohol issues, but overall, our society has developed pretty good structures for using alcohol appropriately and dealing with the fallout when its use becomes destructive.
Canadians will need a lot of education about marijuana, starting with you guys, so that it can be integrated into our society safely and constructively.
In this video, we've tried to highlight some of the background of marijuana, where it can be used safely, and where its use can be problematic. We've also tried to answer some of the questions we've been asked by kids in our school.
Other questions we got asked, but just didn't have time to answer included. What if I only use it once?
What happens if you snort it?
Can you eat marijuana as a salad?
If someone's smoking in the car beside me, will I get high?
Can you inject marijuana?
What wine can I pair with marijuana?
And the most important question of all, did Harambe use weed?
Clearly, we have our work cut out for us.
Thank you for watching this video.
Be safe and have a great school year.